Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the booth. I am your host, PC Jackie Boy, of the notable, fantastic Panther Corps organization. I've got with me a bunch of really great guests. I've got my partner in crime from all the way back of the original booth, Valentine. I have with us some of our favorite color casters of all time, Vega and Lustforce. And today, we're going to chop it up and give some predictions for Econ and Executive. So, gentlemen, welcome to the booth. What you ordering?
All right.
Somebody
Yeah,
go
I
first.
was like,
Somebody
okay,
talk.
I'll go first. You guys know me. I'm getting a chocolate milk. I'm getting a Grand Slam. I'm an easy guy. I like the traditional stuff, and I want to get out ahead of anybody else here who says anything and say, if I put you low on any list, I'm just doing you a favor and giving you some bulletin board material. You could say Vega's wrong at the end of the year. We proved him wrong. So if anything, I'm doing you a favor. Okay.
Well, thank you. We always appreciate favors getting done. Valentine, how are you doing?
It's
Lost composure. All right. Lustforce, how are you doing today?
Immediately. Took me half a second. I am doing fantastic. I'm gonna follow the train and also get a Grand Slam, but it's always a double order of pancakes. Denny's is one of my all-time favorite restaurants. A bit of a hot take, but went to Ocean City for a bachelor party a couple months ago, and we went twice in 24 hours. Wasn't planned, but was absolutely perfect.
Well, that's fantastic. We do love Denny's here, especially the one in Vermont. Valentine, have you figured out what you're ordering?
Absolutely. This is parallel to how it goes when I'm at any restaurant. Anyways, obviously a Grand Slam, and a Sprite because I'm addicted to that specific soda. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about it.
So when I went to Denny's this past week to take the picture of the booth that you guys are seeing on your screens right now, I ordered a hamburger, the like bourbon barbecue burger. I swear to God, that was like of in the top 10 burgers I have ever had in my life. It was like perfectly greasy. It came through strong enough to like it was there, but not so strong that I vomited all over the table.
Hmm.
Like it was fantastic. And I feel like Denny's is like a breakfast spot, so like it was a little bit sacrilegious to go for the burger, but they nailed it. Anyway, yes, we see a little bit of lamentations about no commercial predictions. There will also be no financial predictions. We wanted to wait to do those predictions after the draw show. So stay tuned for that. But on an executive don't have more than one group, so we figured we would just knock those bad boys out today. And I think that's a place to go ahead and get transition on over to predictions. So here on the screen, we can have everybody's predictions lined up nice and neat. So I'll kind of I'll start us off. S-Force, doubting your own org, low on the Naughty Sharks. Oh wait, yeah, no, wrong org. Somebody's
Wrong org.
your volatility.
Nope.
Not
wrong.
quite.
Wrong org.
My heart skipped for a second.
That's a spoiler for executive. All right, you're low on the Sharks. Talk
Oops.
to me. What's that all about?
Look, I think that this is just a classic tale of, championship hangover. I mean, if you look back in any sport, but specifically here in the LBLCS, there really aren't that many teams that have a history of repeating. I think the only team that I can think of is Team Fried Chicken and Financial. So it's really kind of, maybe it's a bit of a hot take, but I'm just taking a gamble that we don't see the same level of excellence that we saw from the Sharks last season. And I'm sure I won't be hearing from Zelius about that in my DMs later today.
Or like in seconds. Yeah. So you're predicting a little regression towards the mean here. Sharks doing great last season, fantastic, but not like doubtful that they can.
They had their time in the sun. It's time for some other teams to step up here.
Very nice. The other thing that kind of stood out to me when I looked through all the predictions is that a lot of you guys are still putting Sensei Randall's and Dog Jinyu Force still pretty high. Problem between those two teams is that they both have key players out of economy and no longer eligible. So do you guys still hold those rankings there even after the players rank out? That's why I have them last with asterisk.
I think Sensei Randall's for me, yes, they maintain their spot. I did move SOG's Genu Force down a decent bit upon the, we'll say, very fast ranking up of Rito Trad. I think definitely hurt them a lot. But for Sensei Randall's, Storied.org with the return of some of LBS's most storied players, I think there will be there's probably going to be at least 3 series where Bud wins it with like 1 to 2 backdoors across just the whole thing. I think there's no way that especially newer econ teams can kind of deal with how he plays the game.
You might say he's notorious for it.
Yeah, he is notorious. Perhaps even a BUD.
Perhaps indeed even a B. Less Force, you also have Strix and Jinyu Force up in your top 4, so you think they can still hold their own up top there? You think maybe you have to adjust their rank?
So I'm also similar to Val in the idea that I do think that Sensei Randall's should still be fine. I think they have enough talent on paper from what I could see to be a top 4 squad. Jinyu Force might be a little bit harder of an argument. Obviously, Rito Trad was a massive player for them last season, was the key cog behind them getting to playoffs where they were swiftly eliminated by the Sharks. But I was looking back through their roster this morning, and I guess just looking at some of the other players they have on their roster, I still felt solid enough about their squad. They are able to sub out Trav with another 3-point player, because that is the cap for econ. And I don't know, maybe I'm sticking true to my rankings as a bit of a stubborn fool, but I still kind of like what I see on paper for the Jinyu Force.
Do you think they still got it even with kind of key play?
They'll just have a different key player in this season.
A little bit of shuffling around. All right, Vega, what about you? Are you adjusting your rankings, or is the algorithm holding true?
The algorithm holds true. I outside of what everybody else has already said about them, I believe in systems, and I think both these teams they just have great systems. So whoever steps in to take those player spots, they're going to slot right in. It's going to be the same identity, same gameplay, and I'm the kind of guy. I don't care what news comes out. My power ranking remains the same, true or false. Nothing. I won't bend from it, regardless of new news. So yeah, I just agree. I think both these teams, the pieces they had already around the players that are out now, were pretty solid. So anybody stepping in should be able to step in there and be comfortable. And I think both teams should hit the ground running early and get those early seasons wins before they might start to drop back from that top four. I think they'll be good at the beginning.
In other words, like the success of the teams is a kind of gestalt principle, not necessarily one player really going.
Exactly.
Gotcha. In terms of like taking a pivot to look at an area, let's disagree. Actually, I just want to, Vega, your microphone, Simpson.
It is.
I also have the same.
Wow. We also both have nice chairs, which I think.
True. Yes. Very nice.
Both have,
There's a little bit of disagreement here. So with Vega and Less Force on one side, and Val and a little bit me too on the other side, in terms of where are we putting Triferix Dusk? Less Force and Vega have them second and first respectively. Val has them second to last, and I got them right in the middle of the pack. So let's hear from Valentine first, and then I'll kind of share some of my thoughts, and then defenders of Triferix. Go ahead and.
I think mine starts how I feel about, especially when it comes to org teams, right? When I think of Serenity, when I think of SNC, Naughty, Cirques to an extent, right? All those teams I rank fairly well because the system, as Vega said, right, the system has a long history of working well, right? We think about Naughty, who had two great teams, two really good teams, and the Dogs were quite really solid as well last season. Obviously, the Sharks took it all. Cirques has had a long storied history of competing in the LBLCS and competing well. SNC had a strong year last year, and I don't think anybody needs to be keyed in on how good and consistent Serenity is. Triferix, to me, has a lot to prove. I think they had a strong econ run a few seasons ago, but this roster, I believe, has none of those players. So I just have to see it to believe it at the current moment.
All right, yeah, I'm looking to try to see where I even wrote down any about about Triferix. Yeah, like I kind of like you said, like I think like with organizations, like the big benefit of obviously have there, and I think where that like really shines is in talk to like high elo players, have the high elo players either do one-on-one coaching or even as I'm losing all my trains of thought right now. The station's dusty.
Trains are late.
I think that like with institutional support, like high elo players can point out macro mistakes in lower elo teams that they wouldn't otherwise be able to, and can have them like start to look at ways to adjust or ways to tweak that. And I think that it's pretty. I think that that's pretty even there. So let's hear from some of those defenders. What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen
Well,
with
Vega go
Triferix?
first.
Yeah, I'll go first. Okay, so I know what I made a point earlier about systems, but throw all that out the window when it comes to Trifax Dusk, okay? Big players make big plays in big moments, and Ghost Border, yeah, I'll throw it out here. It's going to be MVP of economy at the end of this season. I believe go big or go home, so I could not put who I thought was in the algorithm spit out the best player, per my systems for picking who I thought was the best team. And best player can't be not on the best team. So for me, I thought looking at just the roster, it's a whole new roster for Trifax Dust. But on paper, they have all the pieces around Ghost Border for them to succeed. And I just it's hard for me to look at this roster and not say at the very least top 2. But if I think that that's the best player in economy, they're definitely taking home the title.
Yeah, I also have to agree. I identified Ghost Border as one of the best players on paper in Econ. I also saw Hook Flay Prey, Notorious Thresh One Trick by the looks of it, but they do have some other picks up their sleeve. To me, that looked like one of, if not the strongest bot lanes in Econ, and I feel like in Econ it's easier, I feel like, to play through a strong bot side of the map. If I think back to like last season with like Gathering Storm had a really strong bot lane. There's another team that's blanking from my mind last season from Econ. But
SNC team.
yes, the
That's
SNC squad as
yeah.
well. And then they have some solid like supporting pieces like JT Man, who looks like he's going to be in the top side playing relatively safe weak side champs, and I think that pairs well with a strong bot lane. So that's kind of where my mind went to in terms of why I think Triferix will end up towards the top.
Well, some of us are going to be right, and some of us are going to be wrong. Although I think it's probably fairly likely that most of us are going to be wrong. Your complaints about my mic cutting out chat and everyone else have been heard. I have received 3 text messages, 2 Discord DMs, and all of the chat ones. So it should be fine moving forward.
Maybe.
We'll see what happens. Oh, I messed up.
Right.
Maybe it's better now. We'll see.
It's in my walls. Thank you, Ruffian.
I am in the walls. You're right. All right. This is so scuffed, man.
Which one's worse, chopping or echoing?
I have
they have
never. I have
make a
literally
decision
never had
now.
success with.
Guys, just pick your poison.
Yeah, the pre-stream
what do you want?
discussion on audio horrors is reared its head.
You know what I think it was? It's because I set like
You character
the thing to
yourself.
monitor and output so that I could like listen to like how it sounded when I was talking. And I think what happened was that OBS was also picking up the desktop audio, which also included the audio produced by OBS, which was the monitor output. So we should be fine from now on out. Here on out. But hey, gotta get started somehow.
Yep.
In terms of like thinking about, rankings, like I think it's interesting when we disagree pretty strongly. I also think it's interesting when we agree pretty strongly. On average, and if you're kind of taking Strix and Jinyu Force from my rankings and placing them a little bit more normatively where others have placed them, Glacial Storm is falling kind of pretty low, like 7th or 8th on all of our lists. What did they need to do to surprise us, and what are some of those reasons that we're putting them so low in the first place?
So and you can all key me in. I think all of you joined season 4 or later, right? For LBLCS.
Yep.
Yeah, a little bit later.
Okay. And I know, Jack, you were season 4 on the dot, right?
Yep, that's me.
So the first 3 seasons of LBLCS. Now mine is honestly the same reason. The same reason I have Glacial low is the same reason I have Triferix low. Where it is back season 1, 2, 3, and old veterans will know this. I don't know if there's any of them in the chat. Glacial was a perpetually like generationally mid organization in LBLCS. Never like really, really good, but never like overwhelmingly bad. So when I Econ is this, I think this season is not just these are all very close to, if not completely familiar names, right? You have Kick and Squids and Cirques, who are longtime veterans of the league. You have SNC, Serenity, Triferix, even Naughty, who are all well-known orgs. And then you have even Jinyu Force, right? Just played last season, right? Have made a name for themselves through being competitive. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think they were the only team to take a game off the Sharks in playoffs, because I know they went to game 3. They took game 1 off of the Sharks.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So Glacial to me is just like, I just have to see it to believe it. If the success of teams is predicated on systems, this is a system I've never seen work in my I can't count 9 seasons of OBLCS. Just hasn't happened. I'd have to see it to believe it.
So it sounds like you're kind of like fairly skeptical in terms of like, you know, they haven't necessarily been able to prove themselves in the past, and you think it might be kind of a systems level approach that needs to kind of be tweaked in order to start pushing them into the upper brackets of things.
Yep,
All right.
100%.
Les Force, haven't heard from you in a minute, so we're gonna push it over to you, give you the chance. Talk to me. What do you think Glacial
Yeah.
Storm can do to kind of start punching above their weight class?
So I have not been around the LBLCS, or I wasn't around in the ancient times. So to me, I'm looking at Glacial Storm as a bit of a new name to me. But really, when it comes down to looking at it on paper, I just didn't see like there really isn't anyone familiar to me that I've seen play before in the league, and so I don't have any pre-existing knowledge to look on. When I look at the players on the roster and kind of the way the points are shaking out, their highest point player is going to be their support. I believe X Titan X, which, I mean, Jack, I love supports, but I feel like in econ having your top player support is, like maybe those points could have been better spent elsewhere. I mean, maybe Titan proves me wrong. Maybe they like run the map like a core JJ, but I don't know. I feel like I just want to see kind of what these guys do on the Rift before I like, give them props, I guess. Just looking at the other teams, I think there's a lot of good teams in econ, and when there's just nothing that's like popping out to me in terms of like why I should buy into Glacial Storm, that's kind of how they just ended up in last place for me.
Well, that all makes sense to me, and I gotta say, like, if personal experience shows anything, then having your best player on support in economy, all it gets you is second place. Vega, what do you think? Do you agree with what's been said so far, or do you have a different hypothesis for how they could start to surprise us here?
Pretty similar opinions, especially the less force right there. I think the roster has a lot of people that I look at and I say, okay, I see the potential. I see this person as a great cog in a team, but support is their highest ranking team, and it's hard to play through support as a team. Which in economy, a lot of it normally is you have a player who's either really good mechanically that you can kind of play macro around, play to that lane and things like that. Which this could be a case of where Glacial's, the sum is greater than the whole of the parts or whatever, where, maybe their macro plays really good as a team and their support's, shot calling well and they make good macro plays and the other parts don't matter as much. And I'm skeptical just because I haven't seen it yet. And so, yeah, it's kind of a prove it roster for me. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they're awesome, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about being predicted to be low is that the way that you surprise us is by doing really well, and so I'm hoping, I'm optimistic. I think, I think that they can. I think that they have the capacity to start kind of like pushing against that. And there were some like chat messages. Yes, like Nat 20 and Glacial Storm were kind of like linked, not linked, linked, not linked. But don't know where that cookie crumbled. Something we talked about in just before was about the kind of like organizational stuff, and I think that that was a lot of my motivation for putting Serenity's economy team so high. And it seems like I was a bit of an odd one out on that situation, but Vega also seems to be an odd one out in the opposite direction of putting them super low. So I kind of spoke to the benefits of being in an organization. Whether or not anybody was able to hear me because my mic was going all crazy is kind of one thing or another, but just to kind of quickly sum it up, like the benefits is that you have the higher elo players to help train up, coach up, and work with the lower elo players to start to practice some things that, especially towards like the lower echelons of the rank situation, economy teams just don't handle like split pushing well. They just like, it requires like a lot of like macro, and so if you can have higher elo players to coach good macro, which Serenity has shown, especially in their economy teams, then that's a pretty big asset. So, but Vega, your algorithm knocked him down to 8th. So fight me on this.
Yeah, see, the algorithm, it's touchy with coaching. The intangible things are tough for the algorithm to handle. All I can do is put in the players and the opinions on them, and it spits it out. And so, to me, it looked at this roster and said, yeah, it's a prove-it roster among all the others. It's, it's got to be intangibles for this roster to punch up. Not that that's a shot at them. I mean, based on the algorithm, they were not very far into last. They actually technically tied with Glacial, but the tiebreaker on it edged to Glacial there. And to give a little peek behind the scenes on how the algorithm works, I took every roster, inputted it based on CS per minute per position, KDA per position, previous ranking of the team, ranking over the last 4 seasons based on op.gg, and it spits out a score 1 to 10 on every player versus the average in the league. And then it averages all the scores into the team score, and then I sort the teams by their average scores, and it spits it out. So the difference between 5th and 8th was a 0.54. So they may have ended up in 8th, but it's not by a large margin. So I would say, again, much like Glacial, it's a prove it roster. If they have great coaching, it's possible that their macro play shoots them way up this list. But based on some of the data that's available at a glance on this roster, it's hard to place them higher. I wouldn't be surprised to see them finish higher.
Well, that's an incredible algorithm. I definitely don't have the brain power to actually like go through and do that.
Well, it was
I'm glad
easier with
somebody
8
does.
teams when we do. We
Yeah,
did the
commercial's
other
gonna
2
suck
leagues.
for you, huh?
Yeah, it was easy with 8 teams. I was like, please, can we do the 2 that have 8? I have 1 day to finish this.
Yeah. All right, yeah. So, well, I guess that coin landed in your favor there. Force and Valentine, you guys have them kind of middle of the pack. Are you guys kind of accepting both my and Vega's reasons for their success and failures respectively, and kind of averaging the 2 out, or is there something else that we missed that might be kind of pushing them more towards the middle as opposed to either extreme?
Yeah, I just didn't see anyone on paper who I necessarily saw as like the carry or the star player. I mean, I recognize names like Cavino Tocino and Vader used Choke, I believe, played for a Triferic team in Econ last season, if I
Perfect
remember.
Souls last season. Yep.
So like they have some solid players, but I just didn't see anyone, especially in terms of like mid and 80 carry, who are gonna be like upper echelon. And I kind of mentioned it earlier with I think it was the Glacial Storm, but when you in econ, I feel like it's so beneficial to have just like a strong carry player, and you can surround them with easy to play engage or peel or things of that nature, and just really let them shine. I don't think Serenity is going to be terrible. I think I had them first out of the playoffs, 5th place, and you can maybe make the debate that they should be 1 spot higher now that Trad has been removed from the Jin U Force, but. I just think that they'll probably contend for a playoff spot. They might sneak in. They might be first out. But, I just kind of like a couple of the teams that are higher up than them to put them, can't really put them any higher.
So it seems like the like the general ranks, and kind of speaking a little bit more towards Vega's points of like the individual players, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, aren't kind of mathing out above the other players. It's just that Vega has, empirical evidence for it, and you're just like on vibes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Makes sense.
I'm backing up his point with my evidence.
Valentine, talk to us. Are those some similar reasons? Is there something new that you have to add to the equation that would kind of help us resolve our differences?
I do like their returning members, right, between Cavino Casino and which, fun fact, I learned this a few seasons ago before Cavino like just appeared off the face of the earth. His name is Kevin Bacon.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really funny. I believe Tocino, and if someone can correct me if I'm wrong, yeah, Tocino means bacon in Spanish, which I just think makes it one of the best names in the entire league. But those 2, I think Vader had used Choke, actually had a very strong season last season with Triferic Souls, almost made playoffs, and I think we could have seen a lot more from that party. And Cavino Tocino was on 2 of my favorite rosters, Meowington Inc. Gold, and the other team, I think it was Star Surge T1, but I may be wrong, which were both teams I liked a lot, both teams that were surrounded by really strong pieces, like MXTI, for those of you who recognize Y2 Jericho, who are both really good players. I think Cavino returning is going to be a really interesting party. That being said, I don't think they're better than any of the teams I have in my top 4. And it just comes down to that. I think they do. I would love to see a kind of a third really strong player um, come out of the woodworks, or maybe we see a team like or a player like Vader Use Choke or Kavino Tessino kind of come out as a potentially an MVP candidate, right? And push this team into upper echelon. But at the current moment, I think they're good, just not better than any of the other four teams above them.
All makes sense. They're the best except for the other, which I guess would put, um, we kind of touched on other teams, but for kick, kind of is also another one where one of us is different than the rest of us. So Valentine, you are way up on those kick and squids, whereas the rest of us have them like on average 6th place. So defend yourself.
I'm oh exact. I'm so excited. So Kicking Squids, obviously long time org, and a lot of these they initially existed, I believe. I can't remember. Most of these guys have played in Cirques before, if I'm remembering correctly. Xavier, I think Rethus is. I want to double check, which is what I'm gonna do right now.
I believe Rat House has played before.
Yeah, right. Like a lot of LBLCS veterans, but alongside all of that, this team has won econ before. Like this is a team that's won it. They won it in season 6, which was, yes, it was a while ago. But when you look at their roster, this team, it wasn't search, it was Canadian beer drinkers. Some of you may recognize, some of you may not. But Canadian beer drinkers, very strong team. These guys won season 6 econ, which I think I have a similar point for them and Night Sharks, is that they won econ when it was a lot harder to win an econ, right? When players were higher average ranks, all of these things. And while I think Naughty Sharks, you can say they were Night Sharks was one of those higher average teams, Kick and Squids have always been kind of like, they're good rank wise, right? Not amazing. Then you look into the hours they've played together, the things they've done as a team. You think of players who have played in organized League of Legends, in LBLCS organized League of Legends for a long time. This is just a team I have a lot of faith in because they've given me reason to have that faith. I think they're very good. I think they're really consistent as well. And this is their first season back in Econ since season 6, which I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of good data about those players, and I think that you have some pretty good points. Vega, your algorithm has them middle of the pack, so in light of the more intangible, like qualitative knowledge of like these players being able to kind of like punch up and have some success in the league before. Does that change? Does that put any doubt on your algorithm? Are we starting to get skeptical about the math here, or are you holding fast with your computer?
Well, I never doubt the algorithm. That's the first rule of worshiping at the altar of the algorithm, is you can't doubt the algorithm. But I will say, in light of news that we know around like Ginyu Force and Nightmare Phoenix, things like that, I see Kick and Squids potentially punching up into that top 4. They were a bubble team for me anyways at 5th, so based on where they came out in the algorithm, they were only 0.13 behind Nightmare Phoenix based on when I put them in. So there wasn't like a huge gap between them. And just to give on a 1 to 10, the number 1 team was 6.44 and the number 8 team was 5. So there wasn't huge variance between really a lot of the rosters in there. So yeah, I could definitely see that. But the first rule of the algorithm is you have to buy into the algorithm to believe the algorithm. So I have to say, it's just a 5th place team in power rankings for me.
Sounding a little cultish.
Sounding a little cultish. What it also says is that, at least according to your algorithm, the low budget LCS is doing a fantastic job of like their ranks and like creating leagues that seem equitable.
Oh yeah.
So just a little bit of spice on that direction. Les Force, do you have any other points that we didn't necessarily consider? You have them 7th, which is I think the lowest out of all of us.
Yeah, I think I'll take the opposite stance of Val, or I guess the opposite approach. Val was talking about like what they've done over their history in the LBLCS, and then I'll take the approach of like what have they done lately. Last season they were in commercial. They didn't have a great season. Went 1-6 in terms of series. Obviously, they're dropping down from commercial to econ, but I think that in general, this like from what I could tell watching the Squids last season, they're more like they're there to have a good time. This is a group, as mentioned, that's played a lot together, but I think it's more of like kind of casual playing together with friends rather than like grinding and trying to get the championship. Like I think you'll see teams like SNC and the Naughty Sharks and even teams like Glacial Storm, who I rank towards the bottom. Like I feel like it just kind of seems like a different vibe, which maybe that's not a very good analytical point, but the last time we saw the Kickin' Squids, they didn't have a great showing commercial. I just want to see them, show me something different in econ before I guess I give them too much kudos.
So you're kind of hesitant, but you wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they started to kind of outdo your ranking of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they punch into playoffs, but I just need them to show me that this is a different iteration than I guess last season's squad, even if it's the same players.
Well, that all makes sense, and it leaves us with the last team that we haven't yet talked about, but we've talked around a couple of times, which is Snack Bears Nightmare Phoenix, which is quite the name. And it seems like there's also a difference here, and me and Val are on one side of it, and Vega and Less Force on the other side of it, with the latter half kind of predicting some mediocre finishes out of them, and the former half predicting them generally a little bit higher than that. Valentine one spot off the... Or wait. I wrote down all my notes wrong. Me and Less Force are on one side, and Valentine and Vega on the other. So just, pretend I didn't talk. When I took a look at the roster, I think that they have some known variables, those to be some stable players who can, really start to shine. I also think that they're fairly solid, like rank wise, just in terms of like if you're kind of like adding up the like total LP of like all the players, like the Snack Bears generally are on the higher end of that equation. So I think that they can do it. I have them in second place, just falling to the Naughty Sharks. So I think that's generally my thinking on that. Less Force, do you agree with me, or do you have other things that you'd like to kind of throw into the mix?
I think I'll mention the fact that we saw SNC as an org last season in Econ. They made a strong run to the finals, and they did lose to the Sharks, but I feel like that likely ignited something in, because I think some of these players were on the Twimpus Flame roster that is now in commercial. I think some decided to stick back and try to win it in Econ. In particular, SNC Wayne, the captain, had a really good showing in Econ last season. And from what I understand with SNC, I believe that they like play a ton of organized play. Like I'm pretty sure they practice multiple times a week in like an official capacity. And so maybe this is just me, you know, believing in the idea that the team that works the hardest will make it the farthest. But I do think we saw some good things from SNC last season, and so I think that a lot of that should carry over into Econ this season for the squad.
Well, your meritocratic optimism is definitely admirable, and so if nothing else, then we've got that going for us. Valentine and Vega, give us some of your thoughts on the Snack Bears team. You guys kind of have them just shy of the podium, both of you. Before we go ahead and move on over to executive.
I'll say really for them, I think Berisher's a really good player, and he jumped out when I put in the stats as like a pretty good player for them. I think they're just above that kind of maw in the middle, which we'll call a soup. Of all the teams that I had kind of there in the soup, they on paper look like a team that could break out. And SNC, much to what Les said last year, actually, I coached a team last year at Economy that scrimmed them a pretty fair amount. So outside of the algorithm, I'll say that I do think they're a pretty well organized team, and they are grinders. They constantly hit us up for scrims last split. So I would not be surprised to see them punch up a little bit. But I think definitely a playoff team, and I think at least on paper they're a little bit ahead of those teams in the soup below them.
Well, the soup is always an interesting spot to be. Valentine, do you agree with Vegas' logic and thereby his algorithm, or are there additional factors at play?
I think it's just for me. It's contextualizing my top four. I think the only team in my current top four that I think couldn't just swap easily with another team is Naughty Sharks. Um, I have my reasons for that, but I think SNC could finish as high as second for me. I think they bring back a great supportive core between their jungler and they're returning three members. Fake Blade, who I don't remember if they name changed or not. I don't think they did. Wayne, obviously coming through as one of the honestly was one of the best supports. I don't know if they're because I've been trying to figure out if Wayne and Fake Blade are swapping mid support. Either way, I do like that, and obviously their jungler. I refuse to say the Uwu version. I'm going to say Arvos. I refuse. And Arvos is coming back in the jungle. So they're looking at new players in the top and ADC spots, which are obviously really important positions. But as I see it, if you're going to replace basically the entire kind of supporter structure of the team, as well as kind of mid laner with players who already have solid synergy, then I see no reason why the team should be able to just easily climb the ladder back to the top again.
All of that makes a ton of sense to me, and I saw some chitter chatter in the Twitch chat about doing leagues with our own teams and how there will for sure be zero bias. If anybody needs any reason to believe less force on that, it's because he put he doubts his own org in terms of their ability to actually clinch first place here as them second. So what makes you hate your own people?
Well, for one, that was also a trend last season where the commercial team thought that I hated them because I wouldn't rank them at the top of the power rankings, no matter how well they were doing. So it's nothing new in terms of hating my own teams. I didn't want to come off like pretentious, and come into a power ranking and say, "Oh, my team's gonna be the best." But it is a really good team on paper. I'm a lot of familiar names on here. It's actually kind of a bit of a hybrid of two really strong rosters last season in uh, Team Volatility's financial roster as well as the PC Highlanders. We were able to swipe a couple players from you. We got Quicksilver, Sideclick, Youngster Joey, Papa Doge were, well, I guess Sideclick didn't get all pro or all league honors, but the other three did. And then bringing back a former star in financial and Skibby, who wasn't able to play the past season due to the points cap. Uh, I think it's gonna be a really strong roster. I think that for me it was teams 1, 2, and then a gap, and I just happened to go with another team in the one spot personally.
Well, I mean, you kind of like called out some of my reasons to have them really high. Like I know Quick and I know Sideclick, because I think every Team Volatility team has at least two Panther Core players or former Panther Core players. So can appreciate that at least. We got good people over here. But like that was a lot of like my rationale is like I know that they're good players. I know that they are pretty strong in competitive fives, and Quicksilver and Sideclick have a bunch of experience with that, and my experience with them on a personal level has been great, not just as players but as people too. So I have them pretty high up. Vega, however, doesn't even have them on the podium. So is that just an algorithm result, or do you have some more qualitative data to back that one up?
I fought moving them up, even though the algorithm spit them out at fourth. But I thought, you know what? The least I can do is give Less Force and Company some bulletin board material, which I appreciate him not also putting them in first. So that way he can be like, they don't believe in us. But the they is him not putting them first. But yeah, realistically, it just spit them out. That it's a 0.2 difference between them and Lost Cause in the algorithm. So it's probably someone randomly was like plat, like, a season ago, and it's like, oh, it drops your points, on the average down. But realistically, I think this power ranking, unlike my economy power ranking, where I felt like there was realistically like 2, maybe 3 that could compete for a title, any of the top 4 that I put here And I'll even say the algorithm put them low, but Naughty Boys, just as an offset, probably could too. But the top four, realistically to me, were all championship contender teams. Like any of these four teams could get a good meta, good hot streak, and win. This was just purely based on, hey, what it spat out like ranking wise. It doesn't take into account how they'll work together or, historical finishing in LVLCS. So I wouldn't read too far into them being fourth when I believe the top four, it's marginal differences between them.
Well, that makes a ton of sense to me. And Valentine, above average but can't win. Why must you be so cruel to your peoples? But that's fine.
I'm honest.
You are honest.
Why?
That's true.
I focus on being honest.
Actually, I haven't really come to you on Volatility yet, who seems to also be your number one pick to kind of run the top league. What were some of your thoughts kind of putting them on that number one spot?
Well, I laned against Papa Doge and played against Youngster Joey. I've jungled against Youngster Joey and played top lane against Youngster Joey. I've played in scrims with Quick and Cyclic. The only person on this roster who I haven't played against personally is Skibby, and I've only heard good things about the guy. This team on paper is maybe the closest thing I've seen to an LBLCS super team, right? A bunch of players with assorted success, who have all shown their worth, and we're gonna mash them together. We're gonna see if it works. Now, all of that being said, super teams have very bad histories, and especially super teams that are not just kind of, it would be one thing if this was a financial team. Right? If this was a financial team, they'd be my one, and then I'd make vacant spots on the list in like 2, 3, and 4, and then put everybody else. That's like a visual insane. Yeah, we're an executive. And it's not that none of these players have kind of history in executive. Right, I think Skibby and Quicksilver are the only players that have played in LDLCS executive. So I have them first. I really have very little doubt that they will flop. That being said, if they do, I won't be super surprised.
All right. Well, I think you're right. Like, and even in the LVLCS, like super teams have pretty much like I can't think of a super team that like got formed. Everyone's like, oh my god,
PC Elite.
Shut up. Why? I wasn't gonna say it.
Immediately. I was gonna say it though.
But like, yeah, like that's kind of like the notable example of like we were like, oh my god, like it's like like superstar players. All of a like we finished like 6-11 or something ridiculous. So, we tried. In terms of looking kind of across the rest of the top tier, it seems like most of us have the same top three, at least 2 out of 3, except for Vega. And I think the noticeable like difference for Vega there is the Naughty Boys, whom you have like I can't read my own. 6th is like in terms of thinking about the quality of these players in terms of like their history in the LBLCS and just kind of like their history, in terms of like last season as well. Like, are you prepared to put an asterisk on the algorithm on this one?
Yeah, because part of the problem with their roster is they have a lot of really good players, but then there's some players who are like subs that drag that average down a little bit, or you have people who have rapidly climbed over the last like season and a half. So their overall, whereas like I'll give an example, like let's look at another team that did really well, like Ovality. So Skibby got an 8 out of 10 based on the algorithm, but everyone around him was around a 6 or 7. So the ranking stayed pretty, consistent. Whereas, like, and I won't give names, but for instance, like it spit out, PP Bears as an 8, but there's 3 players that it spit out as a 4. So it rapidly brings their average down. Now, there are flaws in any algorithm. You take into account people can just get better over the course of a year, right? They can get rapidly better. It doesn't take into account, tournament experience things like that. So I personally would put an asterisk because, like I said earlier, I kind of include Naughty Boys in that pack at the top of like, would not be surprised to see them make a championship run. Would not be surprised to make them go to finals. But I stick by my power ranking too. I mean, like this is, the algorithm is never wrong, right? I mean, this is the first time I've used it, so it's technically never been wrong. It's never been right, but it's also never been wrong.
If the standings at the end of the season look like your power rankings, I think all of us will need to like do something.
Well-
As like like when you like the loser of like a fantasy league like has to do something. The funniest
Yeah.
one that I heard was that the loser of a fantasy league had to go take the SAT, which I thought was fucking hilarious. Then we'll have to do something about that because if the algorithm just like wins it all, then I don't even know what to say.
Look, someone said trust the process in chat. I just want to point out the 76ers have not won a title, so trust the process. So I don't know if that's really the way I want to go with it. But I will say this. It's the perfect system because if it's wrong, it's the system. It's not me, guys. I didn't spit this out, But if it's right, I designed it. So it's the perfect system, obviously.
It's a scapegoat.
out.
You can scapegoat
Yeah, just
the
like,
whole
guys,
thing.
I didn't do this. You did this. You guys should have ranked up more. Your rating would be higher.
I think it's important to note, by the way, speaking of like things that'll happen if the season plays out this way. I don't know if you saw the message in Twitch chat, but Zelius put his money where his mouth is, quite literally, and said that he'll donate $500 to a charity of Jack's choice if they drop more than 4 series, which would put them around that 6th place.
Yeah.
So
That's quite bold. I'll have to think of a I'll have to think of a
currently-
charity that's going to be $500 richer.
I hope you know I've been keeping a very short tab of predictions that have been made, and that is going there. And that is
That's
going
crazy.
there.
And we seem to be fairly well in agreement about most of our top threes. The big standout here is Lost Cause. Me and Vega are kind of, well, I guess me and Vega's computer are kind of, generally on the same page with that one, whereas Valentine and Less Force, you guys are a lot lower. And, I don't have a computer to back me up, but, this is a team with Axe Defender, who, to my knowledge, to my recollection, was formerly involved in the pro scene as a coach. And like we talked earlier about how like coaching, like when we talked about economy, we talked about how valuable coaching can be. Like having like an LCS or like at least like an academy level coach like on your amateur competitive team feels almost like a cheat code. So Valentine and Less Force, like go ahead and defend yourselves against that. Plus Vega's computer.
how do you defend yourself against a computer?
It doesn't think or have biases, guys. It just is what it is. I will say, just for my side, I think Sushi, Rombat, and Hax Defender were one of the few, like, they were triple eights according to the algorithm, which was really good. And also, I think me and Hax Defender are the only former LCS employees in LBLCS. And so personally, I was like, okay.
Employee?
I was
I did
EG
not-
Academy assistant coach. Yeah.
I did not know that.
What the?
What the fuck?
Yeah. Also Team Fusion in season 5 when Mac Newton was on it in amateur. But yeah,
Okay, noted.
yeah, so I obviously, have a soft spot for Hax Defender, as I feel like he's representing us, that coaches do have hands and can play. So
like it.
yeah, Lost Cause is my, I don't want to say dark horse because I put them third, but they're my, if I was going to have a bias, Lost Cause is up there.
Makes sense.
Well, that's
Um,
certainly news.
Oof. The Lost Cause for me, and I feel this way about basically all of the executive teams, where it is, as someone who I am a huge fan of just spectating anything. I like executive games because I could be so wrong about every single team here. The only team I'm like 99% sure I'm going to be right about, 2 teams, are Team Volatility, and I'm, 1.5 teams, because I think Coffee House could always surprise me. But Lost Cause could easily blow me out of the water. I like depth. Jack knows when I initially sent him my rankings, I had Naughty Boys at like 6 or 7 because they the top 5 really good players, all with good
Like the starting
LBLCS
5?
history and the starting 5 who we assume will be the starting 5, right? Obviously, all great players with great LBLCS history and a history of doing very well in LBLCS. Their subs are Hayits, Ty, and Linoleum.
Oh, don't come from my boys
If
like
you
that.
know, if you know who those 2 players are, you understand the severity of which that intends for their substitutions. So I think with Lost Cause, you have obviously, as Vega mentioned, you have Sushi, the one that starts with an R. I forgot it already. Uh, Rombat and Hax Defender, very good. And then I think there's a minor drop to everyone else, but even then, I still think the team is good. Just I think the same is situation as Serenity. Just think the other, and this is the time it's 6 teams. Um, yeah. So
Well, as you regain your composure, I think you called out another team that we have some pretty interesting almost consensus on, which is Coffee House. I think this is like the only team where it, at least 3 of us have them in the exact same spot. So Vega, your algorithm bumps them all the way up to second. I mean, I'm certain that they're happy for the computer. I have faith in my friends at Coffee House as well. I think that like you mentioned, like the word like dark horse. Coffee House is my dark horse. I think they
Yeah.
can totally surprise me on that. So I'm not overly skeptical of the second place algorithm finish here. Um, but I'm kind of wondering on some other folks' thoughts in terms of, maybe less force, like in terms of what you think might happen. Like, do you have them as a dark horse as well? Do you think they can kind of surprise us and jump up, or do you think that the, kind of LP gap, as it were, is so insurmountable?
So I'm trying to pull up the roster from last season real quick as I filibust because I think that this roster is, yeah, it looks like it's gonna be pretty much the exact same starting 5. Maybe save one. No, I think it's all 5 players. They're running it back. Last season, this was a squad that didn't make playoffs. I think maybe the pool for executive, like with the way that the points shifted and stuff, maybe it kind of like brings the aggregate closer. um i think I think they're a solid squad. I mean, they have definitely some high rated players, blue card hype. I mean, we know Papobo and Triple Net, longtime players and executive, and they've had moments of success. But I think just overall looking at, it's not so much of like what they did wrong or like what they're lacking in. I just think, at least for me specifically, that top 3 is really, really strong. And then after get past Rift Royals, I think the next like 3 to 4 can kind of be in any order you want. So I just want to see Coffee House kind of bounce back from their performance last season and have a stronger campaign.
Well, you touched on another team. I think that is kind of interesting to talk about, which is Rift Royals, which seems to be like fairly unanimously at worst 4th place, and for the rest of you guys, up in a podium finish in well, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd places. What makes these guys so strong? I know that like when I was making my decision, like the gross LP on their side was really impressive, as well as kind of having some known variables in a good way. But they are a new team, so overwhelmingly some unknown parts there. So what were you guys kind of thinking when you guys were making your decisions, and or at least what was the algorithm seeing?
For the algorithm, like you said, I mean, just when you look at LP and like rankings of a lot of the players, their average is really high. All the players are pretty good grinders in solo queue, which I lean to a lot, especially early in seasons. So giving them the benefit of the doubt, if your starting point is at a certain level of play, like if all your players are at a certain level of skill and you have the course of a season to build up teamwork and get better, your starting point versus other teams can be better. So for them, obviously the algorithm's going to think they're great because it takes into account, ranking, where you've placed in solo queue, stuff like that. But just myself, knowing like some of these players that are really good and, players that have competitive experience, I think that when you have a team that level, they're going to hit the ground running. And by the time playoffs roll around, you combine that individual skill with now you've played together over the course of a month or two. They'd be a tough team not to put at least, I think, in playoff contention and title contention.
Do folks agree with that logic, or do you have other points you wanted to add?
I'm think as the lowest elo person here, I see 3 guys who were master last split. That like neuron activation. What? That's a lot of guys that hit a really high rank. More than I think the other teams. I may be wrong with. No, I think. Well, maybe.
They had the biggest gap between, according to the algorithm, the biggest gap between them and the next ranked team of any of the 2 leagues that did.
Yeah, I was like, they're. If we're gonna talk, I assume it takes a decent amount of raw mechanical skill to get to that rank, alongside everything else you need to get there. Alongside everything else you need to get there. Oh, true, Pamelia. No, you gotta kick the engage guy. You kick your little ball, dude. But
That's mechanics.
That's mechanics, man. You never know. Flash R, the speed at which. Anyways, it's like you look at it. I think it would be. It's a lot easier to make an argument for them than it is against them, right? The only reason I have volatility above is because I just think maybe the LBLCS experience will come through. But if they just steamroll the whole season and do a Sharks cosplay, I'd believe it. I wouldn't be surprised. They just stomp through and win their games. I would not surprise me in the least.
Yeah, I don't really have a ton else to say. I mean, I just think that looking at their roster, there's a lot of strong players, not a lot of recognizable names. So I think maybe that knocks them down a little bit. Although I think Ninja is a recognizable name for the LBLCS. But overall, I think that they're a lot of strong players, and I think that they're gonna do quite well. So it wouldn't shock me at all if they end up in the #1 spot. But we'll just have to see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it certainly is definitely a lot of guys, and you're right. Like there are some known players and some unknown players, and I think that that's going to be kind of really interesting and exciting to see how all of that kind of pans out. I think to kind of like wrap this up, like a lot of us have Gritty for God, like kind of close to a podium finish, or like closer, like kind of in the middle of the pack. Do we think that that's a team that could kind of like punch through, or do we think that that's a team that might kind of finish where we expect them to, or lower?
I'll say. If you want to, you can go ahead, Les.
For me, it's more so the latter. I think to me the top 3 is pretty cemented in my mind. So it's gonna be hard for a team like Gritty for God to punch up in that sense. I mean, certainly they could make me look like a fool in about 3 months' time. But as it currently stands, I feel like it's a very strong 3-team race in executive.
I just realized that me and Les Force have like virtually the same ranking. We have the same top 3 teams, the same 4-5, and the same bottom 3 teams.
Yeah,
Nice
executive had a fair amount of agreement across well, at least 3 of us.
I'm trying to give you guys content here, okay? someone has to be a villain, okay?
The algorithm.
Someone's got to do it.
And it's the algorithm, it's not me. It's I don't know what to tell you.
You definitely threw me off with the ghost border take. I won't lie to you. That got me.
So the algorithm, what's telling us about Gritty for God here?
So I agree really with Les and Val on this, which is they're 5th for me, and I think really when you look at even just the way the algorithm spit it out, they're just below that pack at the top of really like contenders. They had the closest tight ranking between all their players, where every player was within 1 point of the next player, according to the algorithm. So whereas some teams have like really high peaks and then like really low valleys that kind of average their score out, naughty boys. I'll say that this team was pretty much dead across the middle, and it put them in kind of the middle of the rankings. They could be one of those teams that emerges as like great team play, could push them, higher up, but I really don't see them competing with the Polalities, Lost Cause, Coffee House, Riff Royals, at least according to the algorithm. And even myself, just like at the eye check of some of the players, like it could be one of those things where some's greater than the whole, but I right now put them right outside that soup at the top.
Well, good thoughts on all of that stuff. And the final two teams that we have yet to discuss are Mac and Cheese Club and Pass Prime, whom we all have fairly unanimously down towards the lower end of our brackets here. When I was kind of going through and making my tier list, I was kind of paying attention to the ranks there, and the fact that like if I don't really know anything about the players because it's like new teams with really new players, got to turn to like rank and champs and win rates and that kind of stuff, and I just wasn't seeing some special sauce there. But I think that's kind of one of the situations you got to kind of mark it with an asterisk, because these guys may be like known variables in other leagues and really having the time of their lives over at the top brackets over there. But what do you guys think they could do to kind of like start to show up big time? Kind of similar to our question about Glacial from Economy.
I'll say for Mac and Cheese, just to kind of speak to what came out for them, they were probably the worst example of variation for me as far as rankings. The algorithm really doesn't know what to do with a team like that, where some players, based on rank, look pretty decent or on par with other ones. It's hard to know, based on like subs on the team, where that falls out. They're really a team that, I couldn't fall back, like you said, on, how were they last season? How were some of these players performing the season before to give them any kind of adjustment? But yeah, it's one of those teams you hope. But once we see the actual starting roster too, I think it'll help, because some of the players I'm like, oh, do I really want to count the subs rank, versus it, where it's like, oh, what if they're a starter? What if this guy who, I'm not going to say any numbers, throws out, is actually starting for them? Then their stock considerably drops or rises. So at least for Mac and Cheese Club, and similar for Pass Prime, until I see more tape or games played or something like that, it's hard to give them an accurate rating. So defaulted the bottom.
Yes, so I did go back and look, and I do believe that both Mac and Cheese Club and Pass Prime have one thing that should be in their favor, which is that these are a group of people that have played in a semi-pro format, together. It looks like they both played as either a high school sports team or a collegiate sports team, so maybe that could be their edge at the beginning of the season, just having that familiarity and competitive play. Maybe they know how to play together as a team, and maybe that will steal some surprise wins. But yeah, it essentially just comes down to the fact that the ranks just weren't there compared to the rest of the squads in executive, which is a tough league this season, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think executive is going to be really exciting to watch. I think it's going to have pretty exciting matches, and well, I can't wait to discuss and dissect all of them with you guys. Well, that about wraps us up for executive, and like I said, we'll be doing commercial and financial rankings after the draw show, which will be happening next Sunday at around 2:00, around the time that we started streaming over here. So to kind of bring us on back over to our lovely wide shot of the booth here, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a ton of fun, and gentlemen, thank you guys for joining me on this wonderful journey of Denny's extravaganza-ness. I hope you guys enjoyed all of your meals, and I hope I'm excited to have you guys back next week. So for everyone else, please make sure to tip your server. 20% is the minimum. But remember that the pancakes are on us, so if they haven't taken those off the receipt, then please make sure to let them know. But folks, any final thoughts before we close on out of the air here?
No, I just think next week's going to be an absolute banger. Obviously, it was mentioned three of us are financial players, financial captains. So that should be super exciting. And then the Megalodon that's going to be 30 commercial teams. That should be quite a time.
Yep.
I'm not ready.
I haven't even decided how we're going to approach that beast yet.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
Well, Kato, no worries. We'll be getting some more syrup soon, so we'll be seeing where that shipment comes in. So when you join us next week, we should have some more syrup. Everybody else, thank you guys. It's been real, and I think we're signing off. So have a great rest of your Sundays, everybody, and a great week ahead of you. Bye.
Peace.